In a recent video I mentioned to you that I got myself a brand new toy. That's a pretty bad description because this thing is actually an incredibly useful piece of equipment. And strangely enough, I've been thinking of looking into these devices, these laser engraver cutters. And a few weeks ago I got contacted by AlgoLaser, who offered me one of these to test it out and do a video on it if I liked it. And this is the result. I'm an absolute noob as regards laser cutters. I have never used one before. I was a little bit intimidated by the fact that I'm going to have this really powerful beam of light flashing around in my workshop, but what I considered the usefulness of this device overcame my reluctance. The laser they sent me is the AlgoLaser Alpha MK2. It's a 22-watt diode laser, and to put this thing together, the instructions are very complete, but I used some videos on the net that some other people had put up, and they did a very, very good job. And since I'm sure that they did a much better job than I could do, I'm not going to go into that procedure. Needless to say, this took me less than an hour to put together. The instruction manual is very, very well done, very complete, and they also provide videos on their channel to describe to you exactly how this thing goes together. Now everything comes in this box, very, very nicely packed. All the parts come protected in this foam packaging, and then all the extras, instructions, little tools, a set of sample materials, everything comes in there so that you can just get cracking and start cutting. All the connections to the actual base are made on the side there. You've got a USB port, a USB-C, which allows you to connect this to a computer. You've got the connection to the power supply and also to the air pump. Now the external parts that come with this are the power supply, which is a power brick that plugs into that side there, and also the air pump. And that is crucial to pump air into the laser head that's cutting, because in that way you avoid getting burn marks or scorching on the material itself. And this is what I like most about this machine. This thing makes it super easy to use. You've got a touch screen over here, which allows you to do just about everything. And the first thing I did was actually to upgrade the firmware. Well, we've got this in English. You can set this all up. And it did a firmware update the minute I switched it on. And I've always had issues with that with other machinery where you've got to download it onto a memory stick, put it in, follow instructions. This thing just did it direct because obviously I had connected it to my wireless network. And that means that anything I do on the computer, I can send it straight to here, which is just fantastic. It really makes it easy to use. You can also do file transfer via USB because you've got that USB-C connection here. But the minute I got this set up, I wanted to use wireless or Wi-Fi, and that's what I've got. It also does a self-test. You can choose your languages, as I've shown you. It can recover from any interruption. There's our firmware and some of the other settings that you might need on here. What else have we got? Well, we can actually go to projects, and you can very, very quickly just start connecting projects on here and printing them without much in terms of learning curve. So that's the beauty of this. You can get this thing, put some material on there and start engraving it or cutting and whatever you want to do. Now, my purpose was different. I had a project in mind. I wanted to do the back of my BRAUN SK25 radio. So I wanted to get as quickly as possible into actually cutting something that I designed on the CAD software. But let's just show you something here. You've got the air pump, which you can set the level on here, and it all obviously starts up by itself when you start cutting. You've got motion control. You can in fact get this thing to move manually, but again, software controls all that. So this thing is really, really great. It makes it so easy to use. And this might look simple, but it's got a dual core CPU with 32 gigs of memory. So backing up is easy. It comes with a 32 gig SD card, and the whole idea is to ensure really stable machine operation. But let me show you how I started working on this thing. I desperately needed to cut out one of these. This is the back cover for the BRAUN SK25, and somebody had done a hash job on here and parts had broken off. So I wanted to get cracking right onto something usable rather than play around with little experiments. I should have tried the experiments first because I must admit that there were a few things here that I had to learn, and I learned them the hard way. Let me show you something. See that? That's what happens when you don't understand power number of passes or speed. So I burnt quite a bit of the baseboard, which is there for that purpose, and I then started getting a bit wise to how to get this thing done. The first thing I did was I'd drawn this up on Fusion, and I saved the drawing as a 2D drawing into a DXF file, which I then imported into Lightburn. Now this Lightburn is a evaluation copy, and I'm looks like I'm going to buy it because it is really, really great. It's quite a learning curve for me because, as I said, I know nothing about lasers or the software that runs them, but it's pretty intuitive, and if you know how to work with other graphic software, it's pretty intuitive once you get into it. Now what I noticed is that this thing comes in mirrored for some reason, and it's quite easy to just flip it. If I can find these, that's the top, and so there we go. That is the right orientation. Now the one thing that I had to learn was how this thing cuts. And so the way you do it, you see all these lines, they're all black. I can change it to any color I like, make it red, which means I now have a line up here, this red line, which can either be a line or a fill. Now this means it's either going to cut or it's going to engrave and fill. Now obviously I needed to cut. And when you select this here, you can then select for this particular color how many passes, and I believe it was 1 that worked out for me. 1 pass, the speed in millimeters per minute, and the maximum power. This is where it gets really tricky. This is where I had to sort of learn, because the first thing I did was I made it very slow and I put in 100% power, and that's why I burnt a whole lot of those. I did a whole lot of burning on that back plate or the bottom waste board that I have there. But I finally got it right. And the other thing then was to put in the text. Now let me show you the final version of this that I used to print, and I'll actually print one and show you the result. Here we go. This black line, if you look at over here, what I found that it needed, the black line, which means all the cutting required, what did I set it at? 2 passes at 800 millimeters per minute and 80% power. And believe me, this was after quite a bit of experimentation, okay? That was the line. Then what I wanted to do was simultaneously do the lettering on there. And this was another set of experiments that I did, but I found that I could replicate the font very well. This is again just a graphics program. You just click on it and you got your text over here. You choose the font, you choose the size. Quite a few experiments that I had to do to get the right size and everything else. And this now is a fill, because what I wanted to do is to actually engrave the letters in, not to cut them. And this also relates then to the power that I'm going to give it. And for this effect, to get the right color on here, I found that 5,000 millimeters per minute and 40% power for 1 pass was perfect. Now I could make this faster and the power greater, but once I hit it, I make a note of it and I stick to it. The other thing I did was I put a line on here, which was really just to make sure that, let's see, there we go. It's this orange line here, just to make sure that this thing would fit on the part of the border where I would position the board itself on the bed in order to get this thing to cut correctly. So what I do here is I would get this thing to frame, and when you press frame, the laser goes and it goes around the limits of where it's going to print, so you know that you are in the right place or not. I'll show you that in a second, but I had to make sure that my device is linked through the Wi-Fi here. And there we go, that's my laser, and that is at a particular IP, and I'm not sure that that is correct. So I need to go look at the laser and check what the IP is, and then add it into there. Now I think there's an easy way to do this, but I haven't figured it out yet. But it's 1, 2, 2, 3 in this particular case. I'm still learning this, as you can figure. So now it should be done. It should be speaking. Yes, it is. I can hear it. If I push frame, it's going to the position where it's going to print this. And it's going right to that position. And what I need to do is I need to put a board in that position as well. So that's the idea. I'll be printing this. This particular line out here will then just be deleted or disabled because I don't want it to do anything on there. In fact, what I could do is disable the others, just enable that one. In other words, just print the orange and do it on a piece of paper, and then, yeah, I'll leave it like this. I'll do it on a piece of paper, and then I know exactly where to put the board on. Let me do that. One of the problems I found when I started experimenting is that I was burning or cutting material straight onto the board, so there was no air gap between the material I was cutting and the board that was acting as a baseboard, which means that there was quite a lot of charring and darkening of the underside. And so I've ordered one of those honeycomb beds, but it hasn't arrived yet. So in the meantime, I've got this metal grill over here, which is not perfect, but it does a decent enough job. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to frame it around that. In fact, let's try frame it around the drawing that we've got and watch this machine go. That is where it's going to cut. Now, to make it easy to figure out where I'm going to put my board, the one that I do want to cut, is I'm going to activate this and I'm going to start. And for that, I've got to put on some glasses because you don't want to look into this thing when it's cutting. I'm not sure what the phone camera is going to do, but I'll leave it on. It's pretty quick. Let's go. I've deactivated the actual shape and I've just got that frame. I can just see the outline. I've made it very, very weak so it doesn't actually burn the paper. But that means I can now take my board, the one I do want to cut, and I can put it in here. In fact, let me give it a little bit more power so that I can see it a little bit clearer. I'm going to make it, say, 6,000 millimeters per minute and hit it again. Now we can see it clearly. So I know now that if I put this in here, over that mark, there's going to be enough leeway either way for this thing to print correctly inside. I'm going to just hold it down. I haven't found that I really needed to, but I don't want to risk it moving for any reason. Okay, now I need to refocus the laser because this thing is now higher. So this thing's got a pretty neat system. You actually just pull that down, bring it to the material. There's this little thing that comes with it. Put it under there, rest this on there, clip it in place, and your laser's focused. Okay, now what I need to do is make sure that I home it again because I've moved it. And now I'm going to let it print or cut. And I'm going to leave the room because sitting in here with these glasses for a long time is not pleasant. And I'll come back when this thing stops. And you can watch. We can then see the result together. Right, well, this thing really got going. And as you can see, there are like 13 rows of probably 25 holes. I won't do the sums. That's a hell of a lot of holes. So I decided to really speed this up because who the hell wants to watch this for 25 minutes? That's about how long it took. I think it took about 25, 26 minutes to finish this whole thing. Now remember, I put this on 2 passes, so it's applying the power that I set and it's doing it twice. Obviously, I could test some more and try and get the power up and the speed down so that it does it in 1 pass, but once I find a solution, I don't want to change it too much. Then obviously it goes around and it cuts the edges and the other holes, and as you can see, we're nearly there. I also changed some of the lighting on this because I don't think you're supposed to watch that blue light, and I have no idea what it does to you if you're looking at it at a screen. In fact, I mean, this is really my ignorance, but I was wondering if it was doing anything to my camera. Anyway, when you don't know, you can say some pretty stupid things. The text comes on last, and yeah, that looks like it's about ready to come out. I wanted to make sure that this thing came out in one go. You know, I didn't want to try and pull it out and then find that parts of it hadn't cut through and have to pass it again, because I think then it wouldn't be as accurate and I'd probably get overlap. But this is it. It's coming out nice and smoothly. Well, that came out pretty well. And the underside is dark because I forgot the paper on there. Damn. Always forget something. That's because of the paper that was on there. I should have taken the paper out, because then it burns and it sprays the color back. But this is the top side, and all I needed to do to get the text clear is a little bit of alcohol, and it cleans right off. And just for good measure, I also pass it across here, because there is a little bit of sort of a residue stain on here. I think it's got to do with whatever's on this paper. There we have it. First go. Now, mind you, I would have had to do this again because, as I said, I forgot the paper on there. But this looks amazing. And again, I could carry on tweaking power and speed and everything else for quite a while longer and get this absolutely spot on so that it doesn't do any of this, and that stain is still sort of there. This has got to do with whatever's on this paper, and I had this with the final one that I used on the radio, but it does come off. And I got my backboard, my backplate, which would previously have been impossible to do. Now this is some sort of cardboard dash, I don't know, it's a mixture of probably MDF and cardboard, and it's perfect for what I want. It's the right thickness, the right rigidity. This is perfect for backplates, and I'm going to get some more of this because I'm sure that I'll probably have to do this again in the future. But I'll never have to go through some of the headaches that I've had before trying to replicate these guys. Right, that one's done. So what do I think about this little beast? I'm really amazed. I'm really pleased with this, and I can see the potential for a lot of applications. The one thing I've got to do is I've got to get that honeycomb base, which is on its way. And the other thing I want to show you is with the materials that I've been using. I mean, the one I used is this guy, and you can do a test pattern cut where the Lightburn software actually does a grid of increasing speed and power, and that tells you which ones will cut and you know, what speed, what power you can get for minimum cutting. That's for that material that I used. I also did one for 3mm MDF, which I'll probably be using most, I think, in the things I'm doing. And so I've now got a reference of what speed versus what power for one pass, and I can also make this for 2 passes. The idea is you take any material you're going to use and create one of these, keep them as a reference, and then you're good. The other thing you've got to be careful about is your eyes. AlgoLaser sends one of these glasses in the box so you don't mess up your retinas. This thing is very high power. It's in the visible spectrum, so it can damage your retinas. So the idea is do not stick around and watch this while it's cutting. The other thing is smoke. Now, I didn't have a problem this time because I've already sort of figured out what sort of power to limit this to. But if you put this thing cutting some wood and you're engraving, for example, this thing can produce quite a bit of smoke. So use this in a space that's got some good ventilation. Don't stick around. Some of the toxins that come off the materials that you're cutting can probably be damaging to your lungs. All this is explained in the guide and in the instructions you'll get. So overall, this thing is going to come in really handy. Just like the 3D printer that I got, I didn't realize how much I needed it till I got it. And this thing's heading the same direction. The problem is I've got my wife asking me for stuff as well. But I suppose that's an acceptable price to pay since I've taken over the home office and made it my workshop, which means she can't even come in here anymore. Yeah, so sacrifices one makes. Anyway, once again, as far as I'm concerned, this thing is incredibly easy to use. So I'd recommend it for anybody. This thing can cut through some pretty serious thicknesses of material. If you're like me and you know nothing about this sort of thing or knew nothing about this sort of thing, do some reading, do some watching, and if you then decide you want to get one, I'll put a link in the description. It's up to you. Once again, I want to thank AlgoLaser for sending me this. I really am pleased that they did. And you're going to be seeing this a lot in the future videos. I hope you enjoyed that, and if you have, click like, share, subscribe, and all that jazz. And if you want to support the channel directly, you can do so on Patreon, PayPal. Once again, thanks for watching. Bye for now, and stay safe.